Hey guys, welcome back to more family drama relationship stories. In today's Ripestories video, how far would your parents go to spoil their favorite child? For mine, the limit did not exist, even if it meant stealing $37,000 directly from my bank account. However, they never expected my response, and it changed absolutely everything. Let's dive right into the video. This story is titled, "Parents secretly used my credit card to book a $37,000 Europe trip for my golden child brother." So I am 29 female and I have a younger brother who's like 24. Growing up, he was always the favorite, no question about it. I'm not saying this out of jealousy or bitterness, it is just a fact that everyone in our extended family has commented on over the years. My aunt used to joke that my brother could set the house on fire and my parents would ask what caused him so much stress that day. I myself worked 2 jobs through college to pay for my own textbooks. My brother got a brand new car for his 18th birthday. I'm not really bitter about the car itself, I'm bitter about the pattern. Every single time there was money for something, it went to him first. If there was anything left over, maybe I would get a little something too. I moved out at 22 and built my own life from scratch, and I now have a decent job in logistics. I pay my own rent, I have good credit because I worked hard to build it, and my brother still lives at home. He has had a string of jobs he's quit or gotten let go from, and my parents always cover for him. If he needs gas money, groceries, a new phone, whatever, they are there for him instantly. I want to be clear that I don't hate my brother. He is not a bad person. He's just never had to be responsible because our parents never let him face consequences. That is on them, not really on him. Even though at this point, he is an adult and could choose differently, so here is what happened. My parents had my card information saved from a trip we took together a couple years back where I paid for everyone's hotel and they promised to pay me back for their share, which they eventually did after I brought it up like 4 times. I didn't think much of keeping the card on file because it never crossed my mind that I would use it without asking. My mom called me one evening sounding way too excited. She told me they had a big surprise for my brother because he had been going through a rough time after his last job fell through and they wanted to do something special to lift his spirits. I asked what the surprise was and she said they were sending him to Europe for a month. I said that sounded amazing and asked how they were affording it since I knew that my dad had been complaining about work being slow. She laughed and said, "Oh, don't worry about that part, we handled it." I should have pressed harder right then, but I didn't think anything was really wrong. A few days later, I got an alert from my bank about a large pending charge. My stomach dropped when I saw the amount. It was almost $37,000, charged to my card for flights, hotels, and some kind of all-inclusive tour package. I called my mom immediately and asked if she knew anything about it. There was a pause and then she said, "Oh, that's the trip. We used your card because it has the best travel rewards and honestly, yours was the only one with enough room on it." I remember just sitting there in silence for a second because I genuinely couldn't process what she was telling me. I asked her if she was joking and she said, "No, why would I joke about that? We are gonna pay you back eventually, don't be so uptight about it." I told her that was not how credit cards worked, that I would be the one responsible for that balance right now, and that it could tank my credit score, and that I never once said yes to this. She actually laughed at me and said, "You're being dramatic, it's for your brother, he needs this after everything he's been through." I asked him what exactly he had been through, losing another job he was not trying very hard to keep? She got a bit defensive then and said that I'd never understand because I was always the tough one who didn't need help. I hung up before I said something I couldn't take back and my hands were literally shaking. I tried talking to my dad the next day hoping he would be the reasonable one for once, but he wasn't. He told me, "We are family and this is what family does for each other. When you need help with your car repair a while back, we helped you." I reminded him that was like $300 I paid back within a month, not $37,000 that I never agreed to. He did not have a response to that other than telling me I was making a big deal out of nothing. My brother texted me a few days later, completely oblivious to the fact that anything was wrong. He just said thanks for helping make this trip happen and that he couldn't wait to post pictures. I did not even know what to say to him, so I just left it on red for a while before eventually replying with a flat "You're welcome," because I didn't want to ruin his excitement before I figured out what I was gonna do. So then I called my credit card company and explained the situation. They told me that since my parents had the card number saved and had used it directly, it would be tough to dispute as fraud unless I could show it was truly unauthorized. I told them it absolutely was unauthorized. I never gave permission for this specific transaction. They opened an investigation but told me it could take a while, and in the meantime I did some digging on my own because something felt off about how confident my parents were that they would pay me back eventually. I found out through a slip-up my mom made in a text that my dad had actually lost his job weeks earlier and hadn't told anyone except her. They were not just being reckless with my money for fun, they were drowning and decided my credit was their lifeline. That made me even angrier, honestly. Not because they were struggling, I would have helped with an actual emergency if they asked me properly, but instead of being honest with me, they lied to me, hid it, and decided to fund a luxury vacation for my brother using money that was not even theirs to take. I called a family meeting over a video call and I laid out everything as calmly as I could. I told them I knew about my dad losing his job, and I told them I knew this trip was $37,000 I never approved, and I told them I had already reported the charge to my credit card company as fraudulent and that I expected the trip to be cancelled. My dad exploded. He said, "You're gonna humiliate this family over some points on a credit card?" I told him it was not about points, it was about the fact that he stole from me and lied to everyone about why he was doing it. My mom tried to smooth things over by saying, "We just need a little time, sweetie, we didn't mean any harm." My brother finally spoke up too, still not fully getting it though. He asked if this meant the trip was cancelled, and I told him yes, because it was never something that should have existed in the first place. He got quiet and then said, "I didn't even ask for this, don't be mad at me." I told him I was not actually mad at him specifically, but he needed to understand that none of this was normal and he was old enough to start seeing that. The call ended with my dad yelling that I was tearing the family apart over money, and my mom crying about how she just wanted to do something nice for once. I then remember just closing my laptop and sitting there feeling completely hollow, and a couple of weeks passed. My credit card company's investigation was still ongoing when things took a turn I didn't even expect. Apparently, my dad, in a panic about how to cover the cost before the dispute could be finalized, tried opening a separate credit line using identity details from me. I found out because I got an alert. I froze immediately, called the number, and found out that someone had applied for a personal loan using my information. When I told them I never authorized this and asked who applied, they gave me the details. That was the moment everything shifted for me. Using my card without asking was one thing, a serious betrayal, but something I could maybe eventually chalk up to boundary issues and entitlement. And by the way guys, if anyone would ever say that OP is the a-hole, I wouldn't say he's the a-hole, but he's definitely stupid if he called someone using your credit card for a $37,000 vacation to just be boundary issues and entitlement. That is fraud to me, plain and simple. OP is way too forgiving. Either way, let me know in the comments, do you think OP is way too nice here? And what would you have done if you were in OP's shoes? Let me know in the comments, and also, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video if you want to support me. However, using my actual identity to apply for a loan in my name was a crime, plain and simple, and I was not gonna sit on that. I filed a police report for identity theft, and they said if the evidence lined up the way I described it, this was not just gonna be a slap on the wrist situation. I want to be honest, there was a part of me that hesitated before filing. I mean, this was still my dad. But then I thought about years of watching my brother get everything handed to him while I had to fight for scraps, and I thought about my mom laughing at me over the phone like I was being an inconvenience for not wanting to be robbed, and I thought about the fact that if I let this go, they would absolutely do it again to someone, maybe even my brother once he had good credit built up, and the investigation moved forward. My credit card company ruled the $37,000 charge as fraudulent and reversed it completely, which was a massive relief. But the identity theft case was a whole different animal, because that's a criminal matter, not just a dispute with a bank. When my parents found out I had gone to the cops, the reaction was exactly what you would expect and then some. My mom called me sobbing, saying I was gonna ruin my dad's life over a misunderstanding, and I told her that using someone's information to apply for a loan without their knowledge is not a misunderstanding, it is fraud, and she knew that, and my dad actually showed up at my apartment unannounced, which he had never done before in my entire life, and he stood in the hallway and said, "You really called the cops on your own father, after everything I've done for you?" And I asked him exactly what he had done for me that justified stealing my identity. He did not have an answer, he just kept repeating that family doesn't do this to family, and I told him family also doesn't steal from family either, and he closed the door. The case moved forward. There wasn't much wiggle room to argue it was some kind of accident. I'm not gonna go into all the legal specifics because honestly, a lot of it was paperwork and waiting, but the short version is that my dad ended up facing actual charges for identity theft and fraud. He tried to argue in front of the judge that he intended to pay it back and never meant any harm, but intent does not really matter when you've used someone else's identity without consent to take out debt in their name, and he ended up being sentenced to time in county jail. My mom lost it completely after that. She called me crying, screaming I destroyed our family and that I was selfish and heartless for not just letting it go. I told her calmly that I didn't put my dad in that position. He did it himself the moment he decided to use my identity instead of having an honest conversation with me about money. She said, "We could have worked this out as family if you were not so cold about everything." I asked her genuinely what working it out would have looked like. Would they have just kept using my credit whenever they wanted as long as I stayed quiet about it? She didn't answer that one. My brother, to his credit, reached out to me privately around this time, and he said he didn't fully understand everything that happened until he saw the actual paperwork my mom had left out on the kitchen table. He told me he felt sick when he realized the trip he was about to go on was funded through identity theft, not just an unauthorized card change like he originally thought. He apologized genuinely for not asking more questions when the trip was first announced. I appreciated that he reached out, but I also told him I needed space from the whole family for a while, him included, not because I blamed him for what our parents did, but because I needed time to process everything without getting pulled back into the same dynamic where I'm expected to just smile and move on for the sake of peace. So yeah, I went no contact with my parents completely after the sentencing. My mom tried reaching out a few times through guilt-tripping voicemails telling me my dad was suffering and that visiting him would mean the world to him. I did not respond to any of them. I was not gonna visit someone in jail for stealing my identity just because he happened to also be my father. The weeks after that were honestly some of the hardest of my life, not because I missed the constant chaos, but because going no contact left this weird empty space where family used to be. I started seeing a therapist to work through it, and one of the first things she pointed out was that I'd spent my entire life being the reasonable one in the family, which usually just meant being the one whose feelings got steamrolled the most, because everyone assumed I could handle it. And that hit different. I realized I'd spent years absorbing unfairness quietly just because I didn't want to cause drama, and this situation was the final straw that forced me to stop absorbing it. A couple months into no contact, my brother started reaching out more consistently, not to guilt me or push me towards forgiving our parents, but just to check in as an actual sibling. He told me he had moved out of our parents' house, gotten a steady job similar to mine actually, and was working on becoming financially independent for the first time in his life. He said watching everything fall apart made him realize how much he had been coasting and how unfair it had been to me, even if he never meant for it to be that way. We started rebuilding our relationship slowly, just the two of us, without our parents involved. It felt a bit strange at first because our entire relationship growing up had kind of been filtered through our parents' favoritism, but once that filter was gone, we actually got along well as adults who respected each other. My dad served his time and got out eventually, but I have not spoken to him since he showed up at my apartment that day. My brother told me he's been trying to rebuild his life, got a low-level job through a program for people re-entering the workforce after incarceration, and seems genuinely humbled by everything that happened. I don't know if I will ever fully forgive him, and I've made peace with the fact that I don't owe him that on any timeline other than my own. As for me, my credit is completely clean now. The fraudulent charge and the loan application were both fully reversed and cleared once the investigation confirmed everything, so none of it actually stuck to my record long term, which honestly was one of my biggest fears throughout this whole thing. Also, I got a small promotion at work a few months after everything settled down, which felt like this quiet little victory that had nothing to do with my family drama at all, just something that was entirely mine. And yeah guys, honestly, with these entitled parent stories, people need to stop acting like family is a magic word or something that turns crimes into awkward misunderstandings. In this story, OP, your parents did not borrow like $20 from your purse. They put a luxury vacation on your credit card without asking, and then your dad allegedly tried to open a whole separate credit line using your information. That is not just a family dispute, that is what you call identity theft in my book. The fact that your mom laughed at you when you were panicking about a $37,000 charge tells me everything. She was not confused about this, she thought that you would be too conditioned to push back on them. And your dad saying that family doesn't do this to family is rich. I mean, exactly, sir. Family does not steal from family, and family does not gamble someone else's financial future because the golden child needs a break. You did not send your dad to jail, his own choices did that. Reporting a crime committed against you is not destroying the family was already broken when they decided your credit score was less important than your brother's vacation photos. And a user in the Reddit comment said, I love how the dad tried to play the family card when he showed up at the apartment. Yeah, family can help family, but family also does not take out fraudulent loans using their kid's identity. That is not a family activity, that is a Wednesday night on Dateline NBC. That's true indeed. Another Reddit comment said, $37,000 for a month in Europe for a guy who cannot even hold down a job. I myself can barely afford to buy a sandwich for lunch without checking my banking app 3 times, and this guy is out here living like a Saudi prince on his sister's dime. And yeah guys, let me know what you think about this in the comments. Do you think OP did the right thing or not? I'm very curious about your opinion. And the next one is a fantastic malicious compliance story which is titled Discipline me for being 22 seconds late without notice? Got it. Won't happen again. So this happened several years ago because it was some malicious compliance that lasted for years. My former employer used a points-based system to track attendance. The parts of the policy relevant to this story are tardy with call-in prior to the start of the shift, half point, tardy with no call, 1 point, accumulate enough points and you are fired. There's a set of train tracks crossing the street that leads to this facility. Occasionally, trains would stop while blocking this crossing. If you're caught there in the last few minutes before you're supposed to clock in, you have a decision to make: wait or go around. Either way, you might be late. Sometimes you will decide to go around and then the train clears the crossing and the folks who waited to get in before you. Sometimes you will wait and watch through the gaps in the train cars as folks who went around pull into the parking lot while you're still idling at a blocked train crossing. To be clear, going around involves taking a lot of secondary county roads as well as a few field access roads. It's an extremely rural area, so you literally never know what kind of road conditions you're gonna find along the way around. The roads may even be entirely unusable during the winter months where snow covers them. One night during my years on third shift, I was stopped at these tracks and decided to wait. Eventually the train moved on. I raced into the parking lot, used my keycard to zip through the turnstiles, and ran to the punch clock. My clock-in time was 10:30 p.m. They have these biometric punch clocks that read your fingerprint to clock employees in and out. Sometimes these clocks will not read your fingerprint. I got to the punch clock and it said 10:30. I'm golden. It doesn't track seconds. I entered my employee ID number and placed my finger on the sensor. There were 3 beeps. It failed to read. Tried it again. 3 beeps. Tried once more. 3 beeps. Nope, not trying again, because by this time the clock was likely to tick over to 10:31 in the middle of reading my finger. When I got to my assigned work area, I told my team manager what happened. He simply said, don't worry about it, he would manually punch me in. I should have listened, but I'm a warrior, and in the morning when the front office people started showing back up, I went to the attendance office to confirm that my situation was all good. The office administrator decided to check my gate time and used that as a determining factor. So then I scanned my keycard at 10:22 p.m. That's a tardy no call, 1 full attendance point to be issued. I reiterated that it was a train stopped on the tracks completely beyond my control, and she advised me to either leave earlier and just wait an extra half an hour for my shift to start on the majority of days, or else get a cell phone, I didn't have one at all back then, to call in with from the road next time. Well, what I did instead was start calling in absent just in case something comes up after I leave home, but before I arrive at work in the evenings before leaving for work. The first few days, the attendance office up front was just bemused, but after weeks they became annoyed. After months they had apparently complained enough and I finally got told to stop. During the course of this conversation, they revealed that calling in too early before the start of your shift made it extra challenging to make sure the notice gets to the right members of management, because the message is no longer flagged as new by the time they are creating logs for the next shift. This was honestly great news for me. From then on, every morning before leaving the premises at the end of my shift, I used one of their phones to call in absent for my next shift that evening. They tried to write me up for insubordination, but the labor union slapped it down, pointing out that the collective bargaining agreement specifies the time we must call in by, but doesn't specify a time before which call-ins may not be made. Cue the huge grin across my face. I never forgot that my team manager tried to do me a solid though. If I was actually gonna be late or absent for some reason, I would call that TM's desk line directly to let them know, and even long after I finally got a cell phone, I continued doing this. I would just call in on my way home, instead of sticking around to use their phones after my shift. I found out years and years later from some union reps that upper management never got over this. It literally drove them nuts that they got beat at their own game by something so simple. It did not bring the walls crumbling down, but it was a persistent, enduring source of frustration and impotence for them. And really, knowing you can manage all that with just a 22-second phone call a day, that is the kind of thing that gets you out of bed in the evening. Edit, probably the number one observation I'm seeing is that I should have just sucked it up and left for work earlier. I've commented about this a couple times already, but just so nobody has to dig for it, I usually left so early that I got to work before the 20 minutes prior to the start of our shifts that we were allowed to clock in. This stop train event was a rare and unpredictable exception, but the crossing was regularly blocked for a few to several minutes by a moving train, not to mention all the other random stuff that could come up on your way to work. And the next one is a malicious compliance story which is titled, "I will call your parents." That's not my story, but it's from my mom. So just to make things easier, Colleen is my mother, Tim her husband at the time, and Dad her dad. So my mom got married to this guy very early, and she didn't really want to get married, but she kind of got pressured into it and didn't know how to get out of it. Once they got married though, he was awful. She tried to leave several times, but he would physically pull her back into the house, and they would get into terrible fights where they were yelling at each other. During an argument one day, Tim said, "You know what? I'm gonna call your parents." My mom said, "Okay, do it." She had no idea what he was expecting from her parents, but she knew it was not gonna end the way that he wanted it to. Anyway, he then called them and asked them to come over, and they were very confused over the phone. Once they arrived, he started ranting about how my mom is a terrible wife and won't do what he says, and all sorts of things along those lines. Once he finally stops, her dad looks over at her and goes, "Hey, do you want to come home with us?" She jumped up and left with her parents. A few months later, the divorce was finalized. And yeah guys, thanks for watching. I will see you again tomorrow.